Super Lucky Disaster Man. Chapter 35, The Liquor Factory Undercover Agent is Confused. The next morning after getting out of bed, Komaeda Nagito discovered that Dazai Osamu had disappeared. Only the used bedding and toothbrush indicated that a guest had indeed stayed there the previous day. Suddenly appearing, suddenly disappearing, like they often met, yet in reality, they weren't very familiar with each other. Truly, just like a stray cat. Komaeda Nagito remarked with a not-so-polite sigh. Komaeda Nagito did not want to waste too much time here, so after quickly washing his face, he rushed off to school. At lunchtime, Komaeda Nagito proactively went to the lower grade to find Kudo Shinichi. Kudo Shinichi, being approached by Komaeda Nagito for the first time, looked surprised and flattered. "Why is senpai here? You helped me find an apartment yesterday. I spoke with the landlord, and we both are very satisfied. It's all thanks to you, Kudo-kun," Komaeda Nagito said enthusiastically. "How should I repay Kudo-kun?" Kudo Shinichi's temple broke out in a cold sweat. "There's no need to go that far, I already told you, it's just a small matter, no effort at all. If I don't properly thank Kudo-kun, I won't be able to accept Kudo-kun's help with peace of mind, for someone like Kudo-kun." Kudo Shinichi immediately tensed up. "Senpai is starting again. How do I interrupt this situation? There are people watching around too." However, the phrase, "no need to thank me," which he had repeated several times since yesterday, was utterly useless. In such situations, a normal person would just accept it first and talk about it later. So, how should he make senpai thank him? Kudo Shinichi quickly spun his thoughts, coming up with a less than optimal solution. "Does senpai often go to the bookstore? Then, if you want to thank me, help me find a detective novel I haven't read yet. But I won't accept it if it's bad." Yes, a very simple request. Even the ones published in Japan he has read through, and the newly published foreign ones are also easy to find. So, adding the restriction of good makes it seem less like he's humoring senpai, right? Senpai should agree. With no clear measure of his own abilities, Kudo Shinichi thought this. Komaeda Nagito was taken aback but cheerfully responded, "Sure, but what exactly has Kudo-kun read through?" Kudo Shinichi pondered. "The deadline is by the end of next month. The ones published in Japan, and the reviews are pretty good, I've basically seen them all. As for those rated as excellent, I've read them all as well. Plus, there's the annual mystery competition. My favorite is the Holmes series, but the author is elusive, so I'm not sure if there will be a next installment. That's why I also pay a lot of attention to foreign published mysteries." Komaeda Nagito reminisced about the quality of modern literature in this world and felt sympathy for Kudo Shinichi. Literature was already not abundant, and when it comes to detective fiction, there are even fewer works. Even the ones that he have read are quite ordinary. It's no wonder that Kudo-kun likes the Holmes series the most, because truly only the Holmes series stands out in terms of quality. After that, in Japan, there is Kudo Shinichi's father, Kudo Yusaku, whose works are still considered excellent, while the rest are just mediocre works being praised beyond their worth. Kudo-kun asked him to help find good detective stories. Surely, he doesn't want to waste his time again. Because his literary standards for works are too high, Komaeda Nagito feels extremely distressed. Clearly, he has the potential to be an outstanding detective, but what if he gets dragged down by this world's barren detective literature? No, he must help Kudo-kun shine with his own brilliance. "Leave it to me," Komaeda Nagito said with 3 times more enthusiasm than before. "I will definitely help Kudo-kun." Thank you." Kudo Shinichi's face was full of confusion, not understanding which point he had triggered for Komaeda senpai this time. But in any case, he just needed to get through this somehow. He really didn't expect any reward. However, he wouldn't refuse to look at a good detective story. Every time, he would sift through. Searching for gems among the sand, he felt it was quite a waste of time. He really wished the publishers would be more strict. If he could guess the culprit after just 2 chapters, then there was no need to publish it at all. Kudo Shinichi, who isn't just clueless about his own shortcomings but also lacks self-awareness about his intelligence, cursed the publishing house in his mind, projecting his own grievances. Despite his complaints, the sales were actually doing pretty well. In any case, after resolving one matter, Kudo Shinichi sent off Ko Maeda Nagito, feeling a sense of relief. Given his senpai's serious attitude, he would probably go looking for it diligently. Even foreign published books could work, as long as it's in a language he has studied. That way, this matter might turn around completely. Kudo Shinichi felt that he truly had come up with a thorough plan, and with a satisfied feeling, he returned to the classroom to eat his bento. Meanwhile, Ko Maeda Nagito, after returning to the classroom, ate bread with one hand while using his phone with the other to access his favorite detective forum, intending to eliminate all the wrong answers first. His thinking wasn't much different from Kudo Shinichi's. Both, when they couldn't find the answers domestically, would search abroad. The good news was that there were indeed some leads, and most of them had English versions, revealing quite a bit. Kudo Shinichi has a wide range of knowledge, and those books that were enthusiastically recommended by the forum, he would definitely check them out. Thinking there might be something worthwhile that hasn't gained much recognition yet, he digs through. From this, it's as if the forum has become a sort of sacred ground for him, meticulously sorting through the language style and publication time, writing reviews, and providing recommendations. It feels like the probability of this approach is a bit far-fetched. The most convenient way is to buy the newly released editions, which Kudo Shinichi would absolutely hasn't read yet. Thinking about it, he decided to search a bit, and then Ko Maeda Nagito silently stared at the latest detective novel published in the UK. That cover looked so familiar. He had just seen it on Kudo Shinichi's desk. Now that he thought about it, it seemed like Kudo-kun had mentioned it to him before. Last month, his parents went traveling around the world, and after that, they might settle in the United States. It was only natural that his parents would be familiar with their son's preferences, and sending back newly published detective novels from the places they traveled to was pretty normal. Ko Maeda Nagito was not affected at all. On the contrary, he became even more enthusiastic. As expected of Kudo-kun, the request for help is indeed very challenging. I have to give it my all. Ko Maeda Nagito quickly revised his future study plan, eager to repay Kudo-kun for helping him find a place to stay as soon as possible. Today was already Friday, and with things to do, the time until school ended passed quickly. However, Ko Maeda Nagito did not hurry to the bookstore or go home to find detective work. Instead, he made a phone call to contact the landlord grandpa. Although they had a great chat yesterday, they ultimately did not sign the contract. The landlord grandpa mentioned that they could sign it after school today, so he just wanted to confirm whether it would be convenient to go over now. The landlord grandpa didn't have much work to do, usually quite free, mostly just taking care of the household's cat. Therefore, he quickly answered the phone, indicating that he was available and ready, and Ko Maeda could come directly. Because of this, after school, Ko Maeda Nagito followed the same route as yesterday and arrived at the landlord's house. The landlord's house had been renovated a few years ago, making it exceptionally comfortable to live in. Additionally, the landlord, who didn't see himself as a qualified landlord, offered a very reasonable rent, making it a great value. It's a bit noisy at night. The landlord openly acknowledged the drawbacks, even complaining about it. Actually, it's mainly young people who stay here. This place used to be my daughter's room. Nowadays, people work such long hours, returning home late at night. During the day, it's actually very quiet. Ko Maeda Nagito adapted well to this situation. Although during the day it looked like there wasn't a trace of human presence, for him, it was even better this way. After all, if any unexpected event were to occur, he wouldn't have to worry about trivial issues like evacuating the people. 4 years ago, the place he rented had once been targeted by a bomb maniac, and it was unclear where the bomb had been placed. As a result, in broad daylight, the Metropolitan Police Department's Explosive Ordnance Disposal Division immediately came in full gear to evacuate the crowd. Incidentally, on that day, Komaeda Nagito even had a fever and fainted in the bathroom. When the police knocked on the door to confirm the situation of the evacuees, they initially didn't notice him. It wasn't until someone sensed that something was off, searched the place again carefully, and realized he hadn't left yet. At that time, Komaeda Nagito was renting an apartment on the same floor as the one equipped with bombs. The police officer carried him out of the bathroom, and as soon as they got out, he urgently informed the ordnance disposal team across the hall that a child had not yet left. Everyone was surprised, unable to understand why, even in such a nearby area, no one had noticed. Later, it was said that the first group to evacuate had someone knock on the door with no response, then forcibly broke in. They quickly looked around inside, found nothing, and left due to time constraints. It was only after the panic-stricken crowd had left, and the building had become quiet again, that someone who sensed something wrong finally heard the sound of running water and went back inside to take another look. However, no matter the circumstances, the fact that there were still people who hadn't been evacuated was extremely urgent. Those left behind from the disposal team were wearing roughly 40 kilograms of heavy anti-riot suits with various metal plates, making their movements very cumbersome. In the end, the only thing they could do was send the one person too lazy to put on protective gear, to bring Komaeda Nagito down the stairs since he had no way of moving on his own. That person was named Hagiwara Kenji, and while going downstairs, he called his friend named Masuda Jinpei. He explained his situation and was met with an angry, "Wear the protective gear properly," that was shouted in frustration. The result was that the two of them couldn't exchange a few words before the bomb that was supposed to be defused upstairs, where the timer had already stopped, suddenly exploded. The entire building shook violently, causing Komaeda Nagito, whose consciousness was already hazy, to pass out completely on the spot. Anyway, when he woke up, Komaeda Nagito was already in the hospital. That police officer named Hagiwara Kenji had managed to take Komaeda Nagito out of the explosion's range, but he still got hit on the head by a falling rock. In the end, he had no choice but to stay in the hospital with Komaeda Nagito for a few days. During that time, Masuda Jinpei came to visit Hagiwara Kenji and scolded him fiercely right in front of Komaeda Nagito, but when he spoke to Komaeda Nagito, his tone was noticeably gentler. "More or less thanks to you, otherwise I'm afraid I'd have ended up visiting the grave of this guy who isn't wearing protective gear right now." Masuda Jinpei took off his sunglasses, revealing a handsome face with a somewhat mischievous expression. Combined with Hagiwara Kenji's similarly outstanding appearance from the neighboring hospital bed, the young Komaeda Nagito almost thought that all the officers from the disposal team were this good-looking. Because they learned about Komaeda Nagito's family situation while helping with the hospitalization procedures, these two police officers even insisted on giving Komaeda Nagito their own phone numbers, telling him to call them if he needed anything. After all, calling someone you personally know in the police directly was far more efficient than just dialing the usual emergency hotline. Consider it giving him a chance to repay a life-saving debt. Masuda Jinpei entered a number into Komaeda Nagito's phone while fiercely glaring at Hagiwara Kenji. No matter how much Komaeda Nagito tried to say that he was actually causing them trouble, neither of these two overly handsome police officers budged. Later, Komaeda Nagito heard from Hagiwara Kenji's colleagues that the two of them had actually been scouted as talents by the disposal team back when they were still in the police academy, which made Komaeda Nagito's affection for them grow even more. At first, it was just during holidays that they would send messages to comfort each other, and occasionally they would talk a little about school matters, but it was limited to that. After all, there was a gap of more than 10 years between them, and even if they tried to make small talk, it wouldn't go far. Simply updating each other about their recent situations was enough. But last year, when Komaeda Nagito was chosen as a hostage by robbers, it happened that during a rare holiday, the two-person team who thought they could relax a bit noticed that something was wrong. When they came over and locked eyes with Komaeda Nagito, both of their expressions were indescribable. The two people's expressions were extremely hard to describe. Since it would take some time for the other police officers to arrive, the two decided to just handle the robbers themselves. Afterwards, Masuda Jinpei even complained to Komaeda Nagito, "Although we are the ones who deal with dangerous items all day, I still feel like your side is a bit more dangerous." Previously, they heard about incidents of car accidents or kidnappings through the messages, and while they were certainly worried, it was different from experience themselves. Now, it's finally clear. It was precisely because of this strange encounter that Komaeda Nagito inexplicably ended up learning a bunch of escape-related knowledge from these two elite police officers. They had actually wanted to teach Komaeda Nagito some fighting techniques, but his physical condition was really not up to par, just a 14-year-old kid, and seeing his obedient demeanor, they couldn't bring themselves to be too harsh. Moreover, the disposal team didn't have many holidays, and they usually stayed in dormitories to be on call at any time, so in the end, they could only teach some beginner's technique. In short, what the landlord grandpa viewed as a disability, Komaeda Nagito didn't see as an issue at all. This time, he came here with the full intention of signing the contract properly. Hopefully, nothing unexpected will happen. It was really hard for him to find a place to stay. With such anticipation, Komaeda Nagito pressed the landlord's doorbell. After a moment, the landlord came to open the door. "Please come in." The landlord led Komaeda Nagito into the entryway, then reached out to close the door. Creak. Huh. The landlord was a bit puzzled and carefully tried to close the door again. Click. Komaeda Nagito noticed something wasn't quite right, so he put his bag down to the side, leaned in, and said, "Why don't I take a look?" The landlord also thought that a young person might know better, so he stepped aside to give Komaeda Nagito space to examine the door properly. But Komaeda Nagito studied it for a moment, remained silent for a few seconds, and regretfully said, "Sorry, it seems like the lock broke." The landlord grandpa, huh? Komaeda Nagito fell into contemplation. Is this considered bad luck? Would it leave a bad impression on the landlord grandpa, like being seen as a harbinger of bad luck, and then he wouldn't be able to rent the room? Fortunately, the landlord grandpa didn't seem to blame Komaeda Nagito for the accident. He just awkwardly said, "How did it end up broken?" "I'll find someone to fix it in a bit." "Ah, Hana-chan." Because Komaeda Nagito wanted to study the lock on the door was left open, and as a result, the landlord's cat took this opportunity to run outside. The landlord, worried, said, "Oh no, it won't remember which floor it's on and will get lost." This time, it really was Komaeda Nagito's fault. Komaeda Nagito immediately apologized, "I'm sorry. I'll go find it right away." After saying that, Komaeda Nagito rushed out, judging the direction based on even the smallest sounds, chasing after the panicked, aimlessly wandering cat into the stairwell. It has to be said that having a physical condition that makes even two elite police officers think, "Forget it," really isn't ideal. Komaeda Nagito was already panting heavily after running up just 2 flights of stairs, but he still had to keep an eye on the cat's movements to prevent it from running to another floor, which would make it even more troublesome to find. Fortunately, Komaeda Nagito quickly saw the dawn of hope. Ahead was the rooftop, the highest floor. There's nowhere for the cat to hide now. But this rooftop has no door. The cat just leapt agilely onto the rooftop, whereas Komaeda Nagito, after confirming that ahead was indeed a dead end, immediately relaxed. With his energy spent, he could no longer give chase. After resting for a while with his hands on his knees, he finally regained a bit of strength and climbed the last few steps. There wasn't a single person on the rooftop, though there were some storage crates scattered around. After losing sight of the cat upon reaching the rooftop, Komaeda Nagito quietly approached the corner where a crate blocked the view and carefully peeked around it. Sure enough, there was the cat that had led him up several flights. "Good kitty, come here." This corner had 2 walls, with the third side blocked by a crate. Komaeda Nagito covered the only exit, feeling that this setup should guarantee nothing would go wrong. But for some reason, the cat seemed to have a problem with him. Maybe it didn't want to go back after finally getting outside, so it fiercely hissed at Komai de Nagito. Komai de Nagito cautiously approached the kitten, predictably using his long sleeves to cover his hand as he slowly reached out. "Come here." The kitten hooked its claws onto Komai de Nagito's sleeve, and Komai de Nagito took the opportunity to pull it into his arms. "Alright, captured." "Ah." After a round of chaos, Komai de Nagito's face was covered with numerous scratch marks, all of them from the claws of this little kitty. However, Komai de Nagito was quite used to this. Last time, when he passed under a tree, a kitten suddenly fell down and clawed the innocent him out of nowhere. This time, it seemed like the kitten knew it had done something bad. After clawing him, it became obedient, being held by Komai de Nagito, gently swishing its tail and twitching its ears. Finally behaving. Komai de Nagito gave a wry smile, not daring to touch his own face, afraid that if there was a scratch somewhere, just touching it would cause an infection. "Anyway, let's just go down together first." Komai de Nagito hadn't even finished speaking when he heard rapid and intense footsteps climbing the stairs. In just a few seconds, the sound went from barely audible to right at the rooftop. "Meow." "Shush." Komai de Nagito soothed the kitten in his arms, pausing his steps. After someone barged onto the rooftop, another person followed closely behind. Through the crack between the cargo containers, Komai de Nagito peered out and saw the two people outside. To his surprise, he recognized one of them. It was the young man with cat-like eyes carrying an instrument bag who had appeared yesterday at the hotel with Amuro-san. As for the other long-haired young man, he really didn't know him. Compared to his relaxed and gentle demeanor yesterday, today, this cat-eyed young man exuded a sense of tension all over, his gaze sharp, and he was holding a pistol that, no matter how you looked at it, was no replica. Truly worthy of being Scotch, you managed to take advantage of the situation to seize my gun. With his back to Komai de Nagito, the long-haired young man said, "But I'm not begging for mercy, just hoping you could hear me out for a few words." Bang! This strange sound interrupted the conversation between the two, and their already tense nerves became even more strained in an instant. Meow. A sweet cat meow sounded, but neither of them relaxed because of it. After all, even if it's just from watching movies, they knew that in situations like this, too many people would choose to imitate a cat. Whether it's a person or a cat, you need to see it with your own eyes to be sure. The young man called Scotch, with cat-like eyes, was actually Morofushi Hiramitsu, an undercover agent from the Public Security Bureau of the Japanese police infiltrating the black organization. Today, his identity was exposed, and he was currently being chased by the long-haired young man known by the code name Rai. He had planned to snatch the opponent's pistol, originally intending that next he would destroy the mobile phone placed in the pocket in front of his chest, to prevent the intelligence from being leaked and involving his colleagues and childhood friend who were also undercover with him, codenamed Bourbon. Without a doubt, if he wanted to destroy the phone, the bullet would definitely pierce through his heart, and he had already been prepared for that. But now, things have changed. Just now, the sound that came out, was it really a cat? This is a normal residential building. If it was an innocent resident who accidentally made the noise, someone so cold and ruthless, with a high mission success rate, known within the organization as the Silver Bullet, would absolutely not spare any civilian who witnessed all this after his death. As a police officer, Morofushi Hiramitsu didn't want to see any innocent people get involved because of him. He had no choice but to temporarily abandon his plan to shift his aim, and continued pointing his gun at Rai. Rai frowned, not turning his head towards the direction of the crate, but instead continued speaking to Morofushi Hiramitsu, "I don't want to kill you either." Morofushi Hiramitsu's gaze uncontrollably stopped behind Rai, meeting the eyes of a boy who was peeking out from behind the cargo crate, holding a cat. This is bad. At the very least, he's still an outstanding student in the police academy, and having an exceptional memory from working undercover, Morofushi Hiramitsu recognized this boy at a glance as someone he had just met yesterday, a boy who seemed to have figured something out, and was even an acquaintance of his childhood friend. His name was Komaida Nagito. Rai stared at Morofushi Hiramitsu, noticing that his gaze was directed behind him, and immediately understood. Sure enough, the sound wasn't from the cat, but from a person. I won't make a move against that person. Rai immediately whispered, actually, I am FBI agent Akai Shuichi, who infiltrated the organization undercover. I'm here to help you. Morofushi Hiramitsu stared at Rai with suspicion, unsure whether to trust him or not. Right at that moment, rapid footsteps sounded from the stairs, making both Morofushi Hiramitsu and Akai Shuichi tense up, adjust their positions, and stay alert to see whether the newcomer was friend or foe. If it's someone from the organization. Morofushi Hiramitsu thought to himself, he could only try to deal with everyone, hoping that by doing so he could protect that child well. If it didn't work out, he'd just have to hope that he could end himself quickly enough, without leaving any leads for the organization. In a tense atmosphere where a second felt like a year, finally, someone made it to the rooftop. Disguised as Amuro Toru, a Japanese police officer immediately raised his pistol upon seeing the situation, seemingly pointing it at his childhood friend, but in fact aiming at the unarmed Akai Shuichi, and asked, "What's going on here?" Faced with two pistols, Akai Shuichi, who had intended to assist the undercover agent, fell into silence. In the midst of this silence, suddenly a gasp-like sound came from behind the cargo container, followed by a cat trotting out from behind. Following closely behind was a young boy, his face full of cat-like scratch marks, shyly poking his head out from the back of the crate again. "Excuse me, may I come out now? That cat didn't scratch me but wanted to run away again." Amuro Toru. Why is it you again? Why do you always show up in weird places? Explain yourself. Ah. Chapter 35 End. Author's note. Masuda Jinpei and Hagiwara Kenji are police academy classmates of Amuro Toru, Bourbon. They appeared in the Conan special episode, The Trembling Metropolitan Police Department, 12 Million Hostages. This episode is quite famous, and it's really well done. Masuda is so handsome, he's like a white moonlight, but sadly, he died. But no matter. Colleagues are the dream, and I want to save all of them. If you want to learn more about those two, you can watch episode 326 of Conan.